Hello and welcome. This is week 5 of our discussion on C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce. Let's start with some prayer. Will you pray with me? God, we're grateful to be together. We're grateful for the opportunity to reflect and discuss and learn from the imagination of others. Pray that you would guide our conversation and that you would be glorified by the thoughts and intentions of our hearts. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. Well, this week we read chapters 7 and 8, and we met a couple new ghosts, ones we haven't actually seen before, which is always fun. But I wanted to ask you all what stood out for you in chapter 7. Let's just start there. What stood out for you in chapter 7 that you really need to talk about?
There was no spirit. This is the first ghost we met who wasn't in a conversation or argument or philosophical debate. His mind was made up.
Mm-hmm.
He was very cynical.
Yeah.
But he was by himself, talking about propaganda and spewing his own.
Yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting thing that I hadn't caught, is that he's the first one we talked to that didn't have a bright person either trying to talk to him or chasing him or engaged in that scene. That's interesting. Thanks.
And I couldn't really tell if he had already had an interaction or hadn't had it yet. But maybe he just wasn't going to have one.
Yeah. Here's Lee and Dreama joining us, or just Dreama. There we go.
Okay.
Hi, Dreama. Hi, Lee. We're just talking about what stood out to us from chapter 7 that we feel like we need to talk about.
I'll be right back.
Jen or Kathy, did you have anything that was standing out to you from chapter 7?
Well, he met this lean, hard-bitten man with the gray hair, and
yeah,
he doesn't seem to be anywhere interested in going any further.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he kind of pulled, I guess the guy who's doing the talking is C.S. Lewis.
It's I, as far as I know.
We kind of brought him his demeanor to a sad point, like he was depressed after talking with him.
Yeah. Yeah, so this chapter kind of started with him being sort of self-conscious and aware of what was going on because he had just seen the bowler hat guy and the voice from the waterfall. And then he meets this guy.
Yeah, they've just started.
Yeah. Hi, Lee. Hi, Dreama.
Hello.
Hello. Dreama's late.
So
The time change.
Yeah, I bet. Time change is an issue sometimes.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any thoughts on chapter 7 about anything in particular that stood out to you? Joey just mentioned that this is the first ghost we see that doesn't have a bright person interacting with them. And Kathy was saying that he kind of discourages and that he just kind of discourages our main character.
Yeah, he's discouraging. I remember that. And then something about your sermon Sunday reminded me of some of this. Something, I'm sorry if I can't remember it really, but
it's okay.
I liked it, by the way, but it's like if you you know, it's like something bad's going to happen. Everything's okay, but something bad's going to happen.
I gotcha.
And that's what I'm thinking too fast because I haven't had a chance to kind of regroup here.
That's okay. All right. Just take a couple of breaths and we'll be fine. So
this is the hard ghost you're talking about then now,
yes.
right?
Yeah, this is the hard bitten ghost.
Yeah, everything is miserable, and it's his own, he's woven this himself, the misery that surrounds him.
And a female is introduced in this.
Yeah, that's the next chapter.
Okay, all right.
We'll get there. And so this hard-bitten ghost guy, how would you describe him? What characteristics would you use?
He was like a salesman, like, you know, someone who can make you want to buy anything, whether you need it or not, or whether he's right or not. Like, you need this in your life for whatever reason, or, you know, just because the author was saying how, well, he seemed kind of discouraged after talking to him. Like, what he says makes sense. He could be right, you know, and it's like the first time he kind of felt down about the place where he was.
Yeah.
Well, I thought he was negative, just so negative. Like hell is a flop, you know, it's like any other town.
I don't think it's part of the anything at all in here, but very often you find folks who are that discouraged. They're former idealists whose idealism was stamped out somehow, or so they lost that. So now everything is, they're realists about everything, and everything's bad. So,
okay.
And no hope.
Yeah, I like that phrase, Lee. Former idealist.
Yeah,
that's a good way to put it for this guy.
Whose idealism? Yeah, you go back the opposite way. You know, if everything, idealist very often is things are going to be rosy, things are going to be this, that, and the other, and things are just great and so forth. And you find it differently and so forth. You lose your idealism, or it's what's the word we use?
Ideology.
Strangled out somehow.
Yeah. Anyone else? What words would you use to describe this guy?
I thought him cynical.
Or an ashtray. Where did they come from?
I put them in there. They're candied pecans.
Candy.
And I had something else I kept pairing with that. I can't remember what it was now. Oh, cynical with no responsibilities. That's what I kept thinking. Not irresponsible, but just he was cynical, and none of it was his fault.
Yeah.
It just was. Everything was bad, or everything wasn't what it was hyped up to be. You know, he visited all these places in his real life, and now hell is just another one of those disappointments. You know, and where's all the hellfire and brimstone and people? He was searing on grids, I think is what he was expecting. You know, like, and then when he got to the heavenly side, just as bad, just as much of a lie, just as, you know, thick. And so nothing would please him.
No people sizzling. I love that.
Yeah.
But isn't that an irony it's an irony to be disappointed with hell.
Yeah. He was disappointed in hell, and he was disappointed in heaven. The words he uses for heaven are this. Look, where is it? I just had it here a second ago. Oh, it's as good as any other park to look at.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Like, this is the guy who in his mind has seen everything, and nothing has lived up to his expectations of it.
Is he kind of a know-it-all?
I think that might be part of it, but I think I think Joey was right in the sense he's cynical.
Yeah, cynical. And I was thinking the word ennui sort of fits him completely, really. As you've seen it all, and you know, you just shrug your shoulders at anything new that comes along. One of the things about him is in his conversation, he has no answers.
Yeah. Yeah. one of the things that the notes I put down about him is that he comes across as knowledgeable enough for everything he says to be plausible. And that's the sort of person that's like, they can say the right word to make you question just about anything. Mm-hmm. I think that's like, Jen, you were saying a salesman or someone who's selling you a thing. I think this guy's selling his cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
He overwhelmingly reminded me of, from the Peanuts movies, the Charlie Brown Christmas, especially when Lucy says, it's Christmas is all run by a big Eastern syndicate. It's all a racket, it's a commercial racket. It was that same kind of, monologue. Everything is conspiracy. Everything is control. There's nothing I can do to make it better anyway.
That's the first thing I thought about. This is the kind of person to avoid. They do not get invited to the Christmas party. That's for sure.
We've all met. We've all met somebody that's sort of like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and
they just can't be happy.
And I think that's the honesty in this fiction, is that the characters we're meeting, they're real people that we meet. Like if we were to caricature somebody, like one of the other things I was thinking about for this guy is this guy's the victim. He's happy playing the victim because he wants them, whoever they are, to make everything worthwhile. He's like, why should you asked me what I want. That's a great question, but that's not for me to put to work for. That's for them to figure out and then make it for me.
Yeah.
Like existence is my buffet sort of thing.
I like that. Existence is my buffet.
But I think also what's important in this story is this guy gives a voice to what a lot of us may have been thinking about. Well, in the sense like, well, if the gray town is hell, then where's the fire? Where's the brimstone? Where's the torture? Where are all the things I was expecting to hear and see? And I think this guy in the story is giving voice to that, saying, well, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And
I like that whole paragraph about they say. They say I love Latin. They'll,
mm-hmm.
this and that. And then at the end he said, and who are the they? We deal with that all the time in life. We talk about they.
Them.
Yeah.
Them.
Yeah.
The ubiquitous them.
And they're the ones that are behind everything.
Yeah.
But he has an effect on the narrator too.
Yeah. Also, hi Illuminati, glad you're watching. That kind of thing. And he does have an effect on the narrator because he disturbs the house of cards just enough to begin to cause the narrator to wonder, well, what if he's right? What if this is all torture? What if this is all, what if this is just to be mean to us and give us a taste of this place? Maybe they're all hiding, laughing as we walk on the sharp grass kind of thing. And the root of that is, oh, go ahead.
In my experience, he has a kind of personality that permeates through the people he's around, the crowd.
Yeah. Well, and he causes the narrator to question everything he already believed.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that's important, is that really that it's important to question. And I think in the story, this character that we're reading about, he needed to question. He needed to say, well, maybe they aren't as good as I thought they were, or as good as they're portraying themselves to be. Because I think we, the readers, need to wrestle with that also. And
yeah, he was wondering whether she get back on the bus or not even.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this guy and his relationship in the story?
Well, the other person he's talking to is beginning to think that some of the things he says are plausible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he is, like Jen said, he's persuasive.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the way that he's described when we first meet him is I think there's a phrase in there, this is the sort of person that I automatically trust or automatically believe.
I think it was reliable, is the word he used.
Yeah, it is. It says, the kind of man I have always instinctively felt to be reliable. And I think there's that sort of person for every one of us. Now, it may not be the same type of person, but I think there's another aspect of it there where there are some people we're more likely to trust than others, even just at first meeting. And that'll be different for each person, I think, too.
I thought the chapter talking about asking us to make a plan, and then it gets into the parson. And it kind of hit home about we was talking about management, but then that's where all the Parsons and Marlists have got the thing upside down. They keep asking us to alter something. You know, we in our society expect the parsons, the pastors, to do everything.
Yeah, I read something else today that gave me some thoughts on that. And the summary of those thoughts are that our over-functioning individuals tend to create under-functioning groups, meaning that if the pastor does all the work, then the laity in the church can rest on their laurels and not have any responsibility, at least in that regard.
And many times they like that, CJ.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. But for those of you who are curious where that thought came from, it was Edwin Friedman's book, Generation to Generation. He's a Jewish psychologist that spent a long time counseling clergy people. And this particular book is about family systems theory and how it applies in the clergy families and life and work. It's a wonderful book.
And the kind of personality you're talking about also applies to marriages also.
Mm-hmm. It does.
One is over functioning. What happens to the other one over time?
Yeah. Friedman would say every system finds its homeostasis, and an over functioning person often creates an under functioning person somewhere else in the system. But getting back to our hard bitten ghost, I want to point out, I guess it's at the end, where he just kind of trails off and says, this is a joke. We all think it looks like morning, and I've never seen one of these that didn't eventually turn out bad in the end. And I think that cynicism that I think Joey, you said earlier, and Lee, you called him a former idealist. I think that's where we end with this guy is he doesn't believe it. He doesn't think it's great. If there was a bright person that had come and talked to him, they gave up because this guy takes the gray town everywhere with him. And I think that there's a phrase that people use, it's a wet blanket. And I think that this guy is kind of a wet blanket.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the old little, y'all would remember, in the old Little Abner comic strip, there was a guy named Joe Bislick, and there was always a cloud over him when he walked along.
Yeah, and I can see that in this guy too.
Yeah.
So let's move on into chapter 8, which we started to a little bit, because this begins with him questioning. I'd never considered that the solid people might not be good, and this is where he reflects on like torture and the torture of Tantalus and the smoke of hell that goes up forever in the sight of the blessed spirits. He reflects on all the philosophical readings and writings that talk about how things aren't necessarily good. He doesn't mention it, but I think also of Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill, that as soon as it gets to the top, it rolls back down the other side and he has to push it back up again forever.
Again, I noticed it's still at the end of chapter 7, the narrator becomes afraid of water. And I didn't know if that water, which is symbolic in so many ways, I didn't know if he had some symbolism related to that in Christianity, because, you know, you got baptism, you got cleanliness, you all kind of, I couldn't see what the symbolism was there, but he became afraid of water.
Yeah. I think it may just be a realization of this world isn't made for someone like me as a ghost. I don't know if there's symbolism in it or not, but that's the realization he's getting to. And he goes a little deeper into that, reflecting on, well, what if a bug lands on me? Or if I'd gotten too close to the spray from the waterfall.
And that was fed from one of the last comments that the hard-bitten man said. You know, he said, every sunny day turns to rain. Mm-hmm. And then he said, and then he kind of looked at him sideways and said, and you didn't think about what rain would do to you here, did you? And then he kind of walked away. Yeah. So like,
yeah.
So it left him in a moment of fear, like, oh, you know, crap. What if it does rain? I know what these lilies we can't bend. You know, the grass blades that are piercing our feet. You know, rain's going to destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
They'll put holes in me.
Yeah.
Yeah. He describes it as machine gun bullets.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that's that. I would almost say irrational chain of thought that this little fear leads to this little bit bigger fear, leads to this little bit like, and he's just rolling down the hill, gaining momentum as he goes. Well, man, just a bug, like you said, a bug lands on my head. I'm going to get crushed to the earth. Like, and so all of these things. Then he remembers the lions. I think it's one of the last lines in there. Like,
Right.
yeah. And then all of a sudden he's just full of terror. All because of that one line that guy says to him in their departure.
Yeah.
And that occasion, that precipitated his concern about whether he should get back on the bus or going into the forest. I was thinking, which wasn't part of this, I was thinking typically when the rain gets on those leaves and runs down, then it gets to be big drops. And if the little drops will go through them, the big drops will really get him. But anyway, he changes his mind, what I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's when you another case, yeah.
So also just to remind us, in the introduction of the preface, I'm not sure what it's called here, C.S. Lewis identifies the idea that he has of this reality thing with a story, a science fiction story that talked about raindrops as solid, that they would pierce you like bullet holes. And so this is probably a sort of a nod to that science fiction author in the midst of the story also. Now, I realize that's not furthering the story along, but I can see how Lewis might weave that in, just as a thank you to the sci-fi author that he got the idea for this from. So he gets overwhelmed with fear and terror of this place, and he gets overwhelmed in, well, maybe the bright people aren't good. Maybe they're actually mean. And just at that moment, he sees another ghostly person run across his line of sight. And it's, a woman. I saw that it had been a woman, a well-dressed woman. And so this is a well-dressed ghost who is terrified, just like he was, but for a completely different reason. What is it about this woman that stands out to you all?
Self-centered. Self-centered.
Say that again, Lee. Outsider.
Self-centered and superficial to a degree too.
Okay, yeah. Focused on herself, yep.
Yeah, just like all the others, they have one little quirk in their nature that they think is so much more important, or important that it overwhelms heaven. They're looking for heaven, their trip to heaven. Yeah. No, that can't be done because of this. And in her instance, is because she would look, they could see her nakedness, so to speak. Yeah. She's not dressed well. She's not dressed well.
She's not dressed appropriately, I think might be how she might say that. You're out there and you're bright and you're glowing and I'm not. And that's, yeah.
Yeah. She's almost,
Yeah.
it's almost
You
not
don't have
about
a
her
body.
clothing. It's more about her physical appearance, how she's a ghost and she's realizing that. But she strikes me as a socialite, someone whose cultural status is wrapped up in that physical image, the way we portray ourselves, that I have to look and dress and act the part in order to maintain status. Because a lot of the things she says, the reason she won't go, reflect that all of this work and that she's put into her image, that she's maintained as her status, will fall away, and they'll make fun of her, or won't accept her, or she won't belong.
Yeah.
And don't you hear me? You know.
Then she said, "But they'll see me. I'd rather die." And he said, "You died already."
Yeah.
Which is a pattern with these bright people, is they're trying to convince the ghosts that they're already dead and they have nothing really that they need to lose. I mean, what's the worst that can happen, kind of thing.
This is at least the second one where they've gone on as if they're not dead. Right at first, I forgot the name of it. The one right at first, it came up that, oh, you know, you're already dead.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's getting ready to turn to making a decision. Oh, I can't. And then the ghost or the spirit blows a horn at her. What the heck is blowing the horn at her? Trying to scare her up to heaven or something?
Well, right before he does that, he says something. And what I think he says is very important. He says something like, "Can't you think of anything but yourself?"
Yeah, bingo.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think.
All right.
Yeah, I've forgotten that.
Yeah, and then he says, then only one expedient remains, and that's when he blows the horn. So this is the last chance this is the last tool I have in my tool belt to help awaken you as a person. I want to
Max Lucado, go ahead.
No, you say what you're going to say, because I was going to move us to a different part of that conversation.
I had a well, the problem is I can't remember the whole thing. Max Lucado, he had his daily devotion kind of thing, and I remember today he was talking about some people who I forgot what kind of person, but there's a certain kind of person, he said, and instead of commiserating with them and, oh, this, that, and the other, sometimes you just have to blow a horn at them. But his point was, in terms of talking with them, you just tell them what's wrong. You don't help them go on with this, oh, poor me, or something like that. And that was just today's, I thought, would fit along with this pretty well.
Yeah, sometimes we need something to startle us, so we get out of our own little trapped stuff. And I think as a mechanism in the story for the narrator, I think this encounter with this woman is what does that. Because he's following the train of, wow, this is really bad. I need to get back to the bus. They're just a bunch of mean people. And then this woman runs across his sight. All he can do is think about her instead of how terrified he is and how much he's questioning everything. But then it gets to a place where Lewis writes, my life depended on her answer, or something like that. I'm trying to think of where that is. It's right near the end of the chapter.
Yeah. I remember though that when the herd of unicorns came along and they were running away, the narrator was running away, and he lost track of her. And I remember feeling, thank goodness she's gone.
Yeah. Well,
you know the story now.
I found it. It's on. It says, "I felt my own destiny hung on her reply. I could have fallen at her feet and begged her to yield. Like, please prove the hard-bitten man wrong, that we actually can stay, that we actually can get more solid, that we can be in this land." And I think that's important to have right now in the story. because we haven't seen that yet.
And in her instance, she would be clothed, I guess.
Yeah, the bright person names her problem. It's shame. It says shame is like that. If you'll accept it, it will. If you will drink the cup to the bottom, you will find it very nourishing. But try to do anything else with it, and it scalds. And I can't read those lines without thinking about Brene Brown's work on shame and vulnerability, and how this woman is invited to be vulnerable with the bright person and begin to experience the land and go out where she's going to be seen, but her shame is preventing her from doing that.
I didn't know, I didn't really come to a conclusion on that, but I wondered, because of the way it's stated, when she says, I don't want to be seen, if there's any greater significance in that, and that is the true me would be shown, would shine through. I didn't know if that was, the statement leads you that possibly in that direction, but I don't know if that was what his intent was on that, or her intent was in saying that.
I think so, because when we look at the ghosts on the bus, and the narrator sees his own image, he can see sort of the ghastly aspects of himself and others. So I think that's part of it too, is there's an aspect that of being revealed in the light kind of thing. Dreama, Jen, Kathy, any thoughts on this? The three of us guys have done the bit of talking here.
I kind of liked how she said, well, if you don't understand, then I'm not going to explain it to you, which, not trying to sound sexist, but a lot of women use that. Like, if you don't get it, I'm not going to explain it. You know, just, you should understand where I'm coming from, is kind of how, and again, it's that selfishness where she thinks about herself almost the whole time.
Yeah, she's basically saying, well, if you can't identify with me, then you're never going to understand. Right.
Like, it's her, there's a word for that, but I can't think of what it is, where it's like, almost like she's in this own little world of her own. She's her own kind of martyr, I guess, that you don't understand where I'm coming from. You could never understand. If I have to explain it, then you'll never get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obtuse is a good word.
Okay. And I think shame may have something to do with that. And sometimes we need something to pull us out of our shame spiral. I think that's another reason for the bright person to blow the horn and call the unicorns. Dreama, Kathy, any thoughts? All right, so let's talk about the unicorns.
Now, what's that? What does that represent?
I don't know if it's a matter of representing anything, but I think it's another aspect of the unreality of this world, the super reality. Because unicorns aren't a real animal, but maybe they were in God's imagination, or they certainly are in C.S. Lewis's imagination in this perspective, in this fiction. And I think that's pretty neat that he's including mythical creatures in this super real existence.
He's got happy animals, and then he got unicorns in there. I guess they're happy having running across and being free.
And his description of that is cool too. I like, he describes the horns and the eyes and how the earth shakes underneath them. It's a fully immersive experience in that description.
Yeah.
And they're not like tiny unicorns either, because he calls them 27 hands. And that is huge. I mean, in college, I got the horse called Goliath from my riding course, and he was 19 hands. And I had to use the step stool just to get into the stirrups. So, I mean, 27 is pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's an equation that we could look up somewhere and it would tell us how tall 27 hands is. My guess is
No,
this way,
it's
right?
this way.
27.
You do it like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, you're looking at a horse that at its shoulders is 7-8 feet tall, probably.
Yeah.
Which is amazing and beautiful, I would imagine, and also terrifying, which our main character identifies. He says, I began to look about for a place of safety. Before I had found one, the danger was all around us.
But he talked about it being a rehearsal. I wonder for what real battle it might be the rehearsal.
Yeah.
Then he heard the ghost scream.
Yeah. Well, and so what do you think? What battle is he referring to? Or what thought is he?
That's what I thought there's something ahead. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who was the passage?
Right here.
Real battle, it might be rehearsal.
I mean, part of it might just be horses playing around, because they do that sort of thing when they play around. Part of it might also be that he's still thinking about how these bright, solid people could just wipe out anybody they wanted to in the gray town. I mean, maybe that's the battle he's still thinking of, because the hard-bitten ghost said, well, the wars really run on both sides.
I kind of took that in the direction of, and this is just my interpretation, but generally you say the word unicorn to someone and we have a very specific, rainbows and happiness connotation with it, but his description of the unicorns invokes fear. Their eyes are red and, their horns and heads are lowered. They're charging. They're not frolicking. They're not all happy in rainbows. And when he says, that this is a rehearsal for some other battle, my mind went to, well, if unicorns are out here causing destruction, imagine what else creation can do. That this is just a prelude to the truly terrifying creatures being truly terrifying. Because I don't normally associate, and in Lewis's other writings, I don't normally associate unicorns as anything but majestic animals who are kind of peaceful in nature. One of the characters rides one into battle.
Yeah, and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, King Peter rides a unicorn into battle with the White Witch. So.
But I don't know. To me, that I kind of took it as simply as, if unicorns can cause this kind of terror, just imagine when we come across the real terrors, what we're going to experience. And that's my interpretation of the rehearsal. But
hopefully we don't react like he did. And right after that, he said, and then he lost his nerve.
Yeah.
I like the way he said it. I can't remember because I don't have my book in front of me, but basically his nerve wouldn't hold. And so he couldn't stay long enough to see what really happens.
Right.
Yeah.
This may be out of place, but so often in Lewis, when he has something like something that's difficult or a battle or something other, to me, it seems symbolic of the Christian's battle, getting through life, getting through to heaven. In other words, the long trek and dealing with all the problems we have in life. And I didn't know if that would be anyway an association there or not.
Yeah. But he said he never saw the end of the interview, like you just alluded to, Joey.
Yeah, and being a work of fiction, you can assign different symbolism to it. There was a movie with Sean Connery many years ago called Finding Forrester, and Sean Connery plays an author in it. And the way the premise goes, there's an English teacher interpreting the author's work, and the author says, I just wrote because I liked writing and wanted to tell a good story. There's no symbolism, no meaning behind it.
Yeah, okay.
But that doesn't mean we're not going to ascribe symbolism to things. It could just be a beautiful story.
I had a conversation with Bobby Bergman yesterday in VBS setup where we're talking about artists, and that there is this artist standing around in a room, and some people were like just saying all this stuff they see and their metaphors they included in their painting and all this stuff, and the artist went, "I'm glad you see that. That's not what I painted."
Yeah. Sometimes I think we're supposed to see some things too, so we try hard.
Yeah, especially when you're used to reading ancient writings and different things did symbolize certain things at times.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes me think of the study of Revelations you're going to have one day. Then I've read Revelations, but I haven't ever studied it. But I'm expecting that everything is going to be symbolism of something, and you're going to tell me what it's all about.
But when I teach that class, I will tell you what I think it's all about. But the nice thing about, the thing about Revelation is the Jewish pool of images is pretty consistent from Old Testament through. And so you have a lot of images in Revelation that you can find elsewhere in the prophets and in the Psalms.
Well, I want to make one thing clear. If the conference ever tells you they're going to move you, you got to say, wait a minute, I've got to teach Revelations.
Well, I'll start right now and teach you that it's revelation. It's not plural. There's only one revelation, and it's the revelation of Jesus Christ.
All right. Good.
So there's the first lesson on the book.
Thank
you.
Well, we have another one here who's made the wrong choice. It seems like most of the folks he sees make the wrong choice.
Mm-hmm.
A big issue throughout has been free will.
Yeah.
Everybody has a free will to do what they want to.
Yeah.
And obviously, I presume that's a big thing to C.S. Lewis, and I don't know if that's part of his argument against the book by Blake, or the poem or whatever by Blake or not. But that's a big, but it's big to his book, I'm sure.
And I think it speaks a lot to God's grace to be able to give us a choice, like a legitimate choice, to give us agency and have power over that agency. When God's desire is for all to dwell with God in glory. And I think that that's all I need to say about that. I think it says something about God's grace to give us agency and respect our choices.
I think also with that though, like truly though, when you look at your own relationships and your own friends, you want people to choose you because they wanted to, not because you made them. Like you don't want to have a robot as a friend that just goes around doing whatever you said and agreeing with you all the time. You want someone to choose you because they want to be with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say that in regards to this ghost, I don't think we've seen the end of the story yet. I don't remember if it's this ghost or another, but I think there's a scene coming up where we see another ghost, or a ghost that we've seen elsewhere, and that resolves in a way that I think is helpful for us to think about. But I wanted to talk about his nerve a little bit before we close. Is a failure of nerve is in terrifying circumstances. That is such a human thing, where things are scary when they're uncomfortable, and we remove ourselves from that situation. And nobody would blame us for it, being surrounded by a bunch of giant unicorns stomping the earth, when as much as a raindrop would hurt us. I can only imagine the unicorns. So we've gone from, what if a bug lands on me, to these giant unicorns and I'm getting out of here. So I can't fault him for running away. there anything else from these two chapters that you really want to discuss that we haven't? And I want
to respond to what you just said, though. I guess trying to keep this back into terms of the Christian, and he's Yederman. He's every man. And I guess the point would be we do fear, using that word more the way we would use it as opposed to respect, but we do fear heaven, we God rather, and we do fear crossing the bar when we die. I've known folks, we've talked about that some, and I have a good buddy talked about being ready to go, and a good buddy, and he said, I hope I'm that way when I get ready to go.
Yeah.
And I guess, and that's the nerve or the fear that perhaps every man would feel in a situation like that.
Yeah, and the quote that I can't come up with, whether it's Proverbs or Psalms right now, is the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that word fear is respect or awe, knowing that God is God and what God can do is the beginning of wisdom. And I think that might also be the reality that we're looking at here. He knows what these unicorns could do if they bumped into him, let alone worse. And so I think that he shows wisdom in leaving, and that's recognizing one's position in reality, I guess, might be one way to put that. Well, any closing thoughts before I pray, and then we'll be done? All right. Well, next week next week we are not going to meet because we have Vacation Bible School, and I believe at least 4 of us are volunteering in it in some way, shape, or form, and so we'll have 2 weeks to read the next 2 chapters. Which I'm sorry, Lee, I know you're really excited about chapter 9, but we'll get to it in 2 weeks. Chapters 9 and 10 in 2 weeks. Is that all right?
Are we going to do 9 and 10 or just 9?
We'll do 9 and 10 in 2 weeks.
Okay, that's plenty of time to read all that.
Yeah, 10 will be the last 5 minutes.
Well, if we have to take 2 weeks to talk about the 2 chapters, then that's okay also.
Okay, yeah.
Well, let's pray. God, I thank you for our conversation and for the ways that you meet us in this story. I ask that what has stuck out to us in our conversation will be enriching to our souls and help us to live as your disciples so that others may see and know and glorify your holy name. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Good to see everybody.
2 weeks. Bye-bye.